I'm setting out to shatter our fictitious assumptions, both old and modern, about the medieval world. This time, what sort of work did women do? Based on medieval records and looking beyond the oldest profession, I'll be taking on the jobs and businesses of the real women recorded as working and apprenticing in the Middle Ages. Women in the workplace didn't just emerge in the factories of the Industrial Revolution, or even in the wartime economy's Rosie the Riveter, or as a part of the feminist revolution of the 1960s. They've been around forever. The medieval period is a fascinating window into the true history of women and work. What kind of position is a wife in when she comes in to hear her child screaming, the cat at the filch and the dog at the hide, her loaf burning on the hearth, her calf suckling, her pot boiling over, and her husband complaining? This is a passage from the Halley Medved, or A Letter on Virginity, a medieval English document that acts as a really handy list for the sort of housework that women would be expected to do. But all of these chores are chores that they come in to do from somewhere else. Where's that somewhere else? Their jobs. Medieval women worked. To get an idea of what kind of jobs were available for your average medieval woman, 80% of whom would have belonged to the peasant class, I've come to Little Woodham Living History Village to apprentice under the expert guidance of experimental archaeologist Caroline Nicolay. She's quickly got me dressing the part. First up on our roster of professions for medieval women is dairymaid.
You want to be a dairymaid, you don't want to be a milkmaid.
Okay.
Milkmaids, you are out in the field the majority of the day, you are milking cows, big animals, usually surrounded by men working, showing elbows, very bad reputation. Whereas the dairymaid has the softest hands because you always are very clean, cleanest of white linens you can possibly get, and you're always with cream, so butter, all these very nice natural fats.
Ooh.
And milk. So dairymaid is actually quite good, and you can get really good wages.
The Statute of Cambridge in 1388 shows that the average wage for women labourers and dairymaids in England was 6 shillings per year. That's about 4 shillings less than their male counterparts, but a wage nonetheless, even if equality was unheard of. And it was preferable to toiling in the fields. So the milkmaids milk the cows, and when would you do that? About what time of day?
Really early, first thing in the morning. You don't even get breakfast, you get dressed, go out, milk the cows.
Okay.
Come back in and let the milk run through various sieves or cloths to make sure there's no animal hair or dust, anything in the milk, and you leave it to set. Once that's done, you will be able to separate the cream from the top of the milk, and you get your milk under there. So the milk you can use to make the cheese, and the cream you can straight away use it to turn into butter.
Making butter by hand is a surprisingly simple process, even for a total novice.
So that's nice and warm now.
Right.
To make the butter, you need to agitate the cream.
Ooh!
Yeah.
It feels like lotion or something like that.
It really does, and you have such soft hands afterwards.
So there you go. Look, it's actually really getting very thick really quickly. I can't believe this. So we're kind of really getting it to come together in a nice thick paste. And just imagine coming in off the fields on a cold, rainy day like this and just slathering a nice bit of butter all over some fresh bread. It's going to be amazing.
And you are seconds away from butter but the buttermilk will come out and you will feel it.
Oh my gosh, no, I can sort of feel a liquid coming out of it now. There's the buttermilk. I'm blown away by how even, a desk girl like me was able to make butter this quickly, with a good teacher.
In the Middle Ages, daily life was filled with hard labor, grueling conditions, and very limited upward social mobility. Medieval society was simply not set up to support you through life's hardships. We've all had moments when life hasn't gone to plan, times when we feel we've failed or fallen behind, and it can be hard to navigate those gaps alone. And fortunately, you don't have to. That's why we're so excited to introduce the paid partner of today's video, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make starting therapy as easy as possible. Just fill out a quick questionnaire to get matched, and if your first therapist isn't the right fit, you can switch anytime at no extra cost. Therapy can teach you to sit with difficult emotions and feel equipped to deal with whatever it is you're facing head on. When it all feels too much, BetterHelp is there to help. Going to therapy is a sign of strength, not weakness. To find out more and get 10% off your first month of therapy, click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/absolutehistory.
As a peasant household, it made sense to have a daughter who was a good dairymaid. Even for a poorer family with just one cow, you'd still have enough milk to make butter, cream, and even cheese for your home.
That's really good butter. It's really good. Super creamy butter. I love it.
But if I wanted to bring in actual money, I'd need to get more creative. A typical cash cottage industry was making cottage cheese, so long as you could get your hands on some salt and some acid, usually in the form of homemade vinegar.
I prefer using cider vinegar or use crab apples to make verjuice. Because it has a nice light flavor, because malt vinegar from the ale is a bit intense.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah.
We'll salt it, and you need to over-salt the milk. So to separate the cheese curds from the whey that we don't want, the acid will do that. So you can pour a bit of vinegar, give it a stir.
Yeah, I can see immediately it's just curdling right up, just in the minute it hit. Look at that.
So you're done pretty much. That's it.
Wow, really?
You have
Okay.
the white curds on one side and the kind of yellowy whey on the other side.
I can see why this was a popular job for women. With the right resources, almost anyone could bake it, so it was a real cottage industry. That's why it's not uncommon for women merchants to appear in medieval records, especially businesswomen often appearing as cheesemongers. What do we need to go from a cheese like this to something that you would actually be able to sell at market?
So once you have the cheese curds, you would get a clean cloth and you would put them in a cheese mold and you press it. So you add a weight on top of it. You would leave it to mature to become a hard cheese. If you are dairying properly, you have so much milk to process every day. So you have a constant work. You get some cheese on the shelf that are matured, sell them at market. Some just replace them and they need to stay there for a while. And it just never ends.
Wow.
But just during the dairy season.
So this is big business then. You've got women who are looking after 18-some cows. You've got staff who are in there looking after your cheese. You've got staff who are milking. You have real money that's kind of going around the place if you run a dairy. Business women.
Yeah, really.
Another highly skilled profession that medieval women are frequently recorded as working in is professional baking. Either making the whole loaf from scratch or just providing a baking service in special bread ovens.
So that's what we're going to use today. Otherwise, you would have to make your dough and bring it to the oven, to the baker.
So you make the dough, they do the baking.
And you pay them to do that. So if you want to save money, you can bake on your fire, but you'd better not be caught because you're avoiding taxes, basically.
Oh! Bread and dairy products were staples in every household. Your literal bread and butter. So it makes sense that during the Middle Ages, this was serious business. Bakers' guilds were introduced to protect the interests of members and to regulate controls governing the price and weight of bread. And it could land you in some pretty hot water if you got things wrong or tried to cheat the system, as happened to a crafty London pair called Alice de Brightonock and Lucy de Pickering. They were both bakers who were running bit of a sneaky ruse. And what they would do is when someone brought in their loaf to be baked, someone from their house hid underneath the table. And they'd made a secret hole inside the table and they would pinch off little bits of everybody's bread loaf. They would then combine all those bits of dough to make other loaves, which they would then offer for sale. They get caught doing this and there's a huge outcry. A bunch of men are caught as well. They're put in the stocks and the women are both sent to Newgate jail until all of the tables can be destroyed. So this seems like kind of a funny story and, well, frankly, it is, but they're literally stealing the bread out of their neighbors' mouths when they do this. It's incredibly dishonorable, and basically they get in huge trouble for it. Because, you know, when someone is doing a bunch of manual labor like this, they expect to get the food at the end. Well, I noticed that our fire is dying down a little bit here. Do we need to build that back up?
It basically is the end of the cooking day. So you would have to leave it to die down exactly like that and use this. A curfew, a cover fire. It comes from couvre-feu, So curfews to stop the sparks going up the chimney, because of course everything is made of thatch. And as houses are usually very close together, the whole neighborhood might just go up in flames. You would rake all your embers, put that on, and hope that tomorrow morning, when you remove it, you have some nice, lovely red embers, so you can start your fire again.
Managing a bread oven was a skilled business with a perpetual risk of the flames getting out of hand. Remember, the Great Fire of London famously began with a blaze starting at a baker's in the night. So, we've got our bread, butter, and cheese. But I think I'm going to need something to wash it all down with. My favorite drink, beer. Brewing was frequently a female profession. Most women would make their own ale at home, but in the professional world, it remained largely feminized work as well, and alehouses and breweries were often run by women known as alewives. Now, this isn't women's work that was as accessible as being a dairymaid. A brewer with her own large-scale brewery was probably one of the wealthier peasants. In fact, it was so lucrative that even members of the nobility sometimes got involved. And it was another industry that was heavily regulated with serious punishments for those who made a mistake or tried to skimp on ingredients. And, like most professions in the Middle Ages, it was hot and sweaty business that wasn't without its risks.
If you dig into the records, you can find evidence of women involved in accidents as well, such as Lady Juliana de Beauchamp. Her brewing business was profitable enough to employ several female assistants.
2 of her brewing maids were carrying malt to put in a huge vat of boiling water in order to make commercial beer. One of them slipped and fell into the boiling water. The huge vat that they had been using to carry the malt in fell on top of her. They managed to pull her out, but she was scalded to death and she died really shortly thereafter. So while this seems kind of cute and a nice thing to do, it's also important to keep in mind that this is really dangerous. We're dealing with huge quantities of boiling water. You're dealing with really heavy things. So women are doing really dangerous work all the time.
And that's pretty much it. So all the grain and all the bits that you don't want, in any case, in your beer, are now in the cloth, and a lot of the malt is left over in there. Perfect. Next step, I'm going to put that over the fire, leave it to boil. And if you had some, that's the point, you would actually add some flavorings to it. Gorse flowers or heather, elderberries when it's in season. I don't like hops. I live in the late medieval England before hops becomes really a thing, and it's really, really bitter.
We also see in the late medieval period, as a part of this, people writing pamphlets against the evils of adding hops to beer. They say it's a foreign and continental practice and that it leads to devilry.
Ooh, devilry. When that will have boiled or will be boiling, we bring it back, put it in another clean wooden tub and leave it to cool down. We'll add some balm, some yeast from a previous batch of ale, and we'll leave it there, just covered, to begin to ferment. And as soon as it starts, in these.
Right.
You leave them open, so the fermentation produces gas, it comes out. After, say, a couple of days, you can put the little tap on it, but leave it open. And after another day, maybe 2, depending on the time of the year, normally you have fermented, so it means that the yeast will have eaten all the sugars from the malt and turned them into alcohol. You then have ale, you're fine.
Well, I don't want to wait, but I suppose for ale, it's worth it.
It is.
As we move away from the countryside and into towns and cities, we have plenty of records showing that urban medieval women worked as everything from carpenters to painters, goldsmiths and blacksmiths. But here in the city, there are fewer women producing food and textiles. Not for a lack of skill, but because they weren't allowed to join the men-only guilds and apprenticeships. Despite this, women were often allowed to practice if it meant continuing the work of an elderly or deceased husband or father. This loophole enabled many women to gain a foothold in lucrative occupations. We know a very successful tradeswoman worked here at Greyfriars Church in London as a specialist stonemason, carrying on the family business. One particularly interesting medieval craftswoman was Domina Agnes Ramsay. She was the daughter of the master craftsman William Ramsay, and it makes sense that she becomes a master mason herself upon his death in 1349. What isn't quite so common as learning at your father's feet is the level that Agnes was able to maintain. She is contracted by none other but Queen Isabella herself to make the funerary tomb for Edward II here at Greyfriars in London. The cost of this contract was £100, an absolutely vast sum of money in the medieval period. We know that she was also working at churches all over London because we have lots of records of all of her business dealings. And this makes a lot of sense because London had lots of need for masons. There's plenty of monasteries, churches that always need building. We know that Agnes dies at about 1399 because that's when the paper trail dries up. No more contracts, no more record of Agnes, probably no more Agnes. Now, I absolutely love the story of Agnes, but I want to know more about medieval masonry. So to do that, I'm visiting the most important religious site in medieval England, Canterbury Cathedral.
Canterbury Cathedral has seen plenty of changes over the centuries, but the church you see today is nearly all built in the Middle Ages. The team that preserves it used many of the skills perfected by their medieval predecessors, and Jen Jordan follows in the tradition of female masons.
How many masons do you have working now at the cathedral?
We have a team of about 14 at the minute,
Okay.
including apprentices.
So 14 masons just in this particular shop, and that's only for Canterbury Cathedral, right?
Yeah, we're employed directly by the Dean and Chapter of Canterbury Cathedral, so we are in-house masons.
And the fact that you're a woman, you're a mason, and you've come up through the apprenticeship system, that's not at all unusual, even from a historical context, is it?
All across the cathedrals, we've all had a fair share of female masons, I'm glad to say.
Wherever possible, medieval methods are still used, from traditional paper templates to tools. This is a handmade cathedral. And now it's time for me to make my mark.
One good strong hit and then draw it back and then replace it.
Okay, all right. No, it's good to watch someone fail at this completely just to see what a good mason you are. Don't let my father, who's a carpenter, see this. He's gonna be ashamed of me. Okay. Look at the difference. Here's your like really neat straight line, and then here's my just completely off track. I think, yeah, I'm gonna need another 3 years at least.
In the workshop, there are some ancient pieces waiting for repair, as well as newly created stonework ready to be put in place.
This is a finial, and that's an apex stone.
Got this nice high medieval, really pointed arch, which is what I like to see. I like a little bit of Gothic in my stonework. What kind of stone is it exactly?
This is a French limestone lavaux. The original stone on the building is carnstone, a really beautiful stone, but we have limited resources of that, so we've had to use a similar stone.
Oh, but I love that though, because it reminds us that stone actually is a finite resource, especially when you're using it to make huge buildings like Canterbury.
Caen stone came from Normandy in northern France, famous for its own castle and churches. The stone was much used in England after the Norman conquest. Detailed pieces like this will be raised up into Canterbury's vaulting. It's great to think that a female mason's work will again rest high above the congregation, helping to preserve this magnificent cathedral. It's tempting to think that if a job was more physical, then perhaps women wouldn't be involved. But I've discovered that skilled and back-breaking work from the field to the dairy to the stonemason's yard was undertaken by men and women, regardless of the physical strain. A great example of this is in the records of another celebrated building, the Tower of London. Documents reveal women working here in one of the toughest medieval professions. Tracy Borman is the tower's chief curator. She knows exactly what this busy fortress was like 700 years ago.
It was a bustling place, really, a miniature town. There were houses, pubs, forges, there was a weapons store, there was even a zoo here in the tower. So there had been all sorts of trades here, people who sold food, wine, people who made things. The Royal Armoury was here, so the weapons factory really for the country, but also the Royal Mint, making the nation's coinage. We know that Catherine of Berry, in the 1300s, she ran a forge here. She ran it actually after her husband had passed away and on behalf of her son, who went to fight at the Battle of Crecy in 1346. In the following century, the 1400s, there was a woman called Margaret Mersch, who was also a blacksmith here at the tower. So it's fascinating.
This sort of hints at posh academic word, right? This idea of coverture. If you're a busy man like a blacksmith, you're spending all day in the forge, you're not just going to get married because you love someone, even though, that's a perfectly fine reason to do so, but you want someone who's going to be helping out, right?
Of course you do. You want an equal partner, really, someone who's going to help out, not just be the sort of dutiful wife at home cooking meals. It's going to be a business partnership as well as a sort of love marriage, if you're lucky, really. I think women such as Catherine and Margaret really were the tip of the iceberg. There were probably hundreds of women working here at the Tower in professions not usually associated with women, hands-on, quite hard manual labour. But the records don't tell us this, so we only have these few tantalising glimpses.
And that's the challenge for historians interested in medieval society. So often, women are only hinted at in the records. Finding out details about the lives of medieval women isn't just a challenge when studying the working classes. There isn't that much written about women at the top of the tree either.
So, for example, Matilda of Flanders, she was the wife of William the Conqueror, who built the Tower of London originally. The records of her are so scarce. You have to piece together these little threads to get a sense of what the Queen herself was doing. So imagine the challenge when it comes to women who are doing things like, working in a forge or lowly manual labour. It's so much harder.
It just goes to show that there are women everywhere doing incredibly important, really interesting things, but you just have to squint so much harder to see it.
Yeah, they're there if you look hard enough, but I think what we're seeing is just a fraction of the real picture.
I can't help but wonder what work must have been like for the female Tower of London blacksmiths Catherine of Barry and Margaret Mersch. So, using the same equipment and tools available to a 15th century blacksmith, I'm back with our Jill of all trades, Caroline. How about we make a knife to help spread that butter we made earlier?
The first thing is getting some metal. It has a bit of an angle, but we'll make a blade on one side and the rest will be an all metal handle. And the first thing first, heating it up in the fire.
Ooh.
Right, that's hot enough. So what we'll do is we'll basically hammer a point on one side.
Right.
You see how it cools down really quickly?
Really fast, yeah.
We'll put it back in the fire and you can carry on with that straight away.
I think I might have found my medieval vocation as a lady blacksmith's assistant.
And keep hitting and I'm moving the metal. Perfect. Yes. So you see you have a mark there. You have a little neck. So that will be your blade and then your handle will carry on there. Then we'll cut it off.
Okay.
That's it, and you keep hitting.
It's starting to look like a knife, but now we need to forge the cutting edge.
I have it at an angle and you can hit just on the edge.
All right.
And we'll stop there.
We've got a knife!
Yeah, you've got a knife.
So it might not be fit for the King of England, but I'd like to think I've done the medieval craft and trade women of the Middle Ages proud.
Well, I am absolutely knackered. And you might think that the idea of a career woman coming in at the end of the day from a busy job is a modern one, but nothing could be further from the truth. Medieval women were absolutely workers. Whether you're the dairymaid who's churning up cheese, or the important businesswoman who owns that dairy, you had a job that you were doing all day. And at the same time, when you sat down to eat, every single thing on your table was either made by you or another woman in your employment. So, while I am about to tuck in and really enjoy the fruits of my labors, at the back of my head I also realize I have to do it all again tomorrow. Caroline, come on, let's tuck in.
I think we've shown that whether you're making some extra cheese on the side as a dairymaid, or chiseling out a successful career for yourself as a stonemason, there was no profession too tough for medieval women. Despite misconceptions over what was considered women's work, I hope I've proved that during this period, no matter how arduous the profession, there were always women ready and willing to take on the job.